Hi, I'm Megan.
I'm Colin, and this is Pet Sitter Confessional,
an open and honest discussion about life as a pet sitter.
brought to you by Time to Pet and PetSit International. Back on episode 113, Megan and I had what we called the gig conversation after we read an article posted on SparkyGo.com by Josh Schermer, where he interviewed several pet owners from across his area about what they viewed a pet sitter to be and their expectation of a pet sitter that was independent versus one that was listed on a large listing service. Josh joins us today to talk about that article, the kind of research that he put into it, and some of his major takeaways and how they're going to impact the industry moving forward. We also talk about what it means to be a leader in our businesses, how to stay streamlined and adaptive to things as the industry continues to change, and how we balance our desire to be in control versus our desire to be successful. Let's get started.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I've sort of been engaged with animals my whole life. Starting as a kid, I started rescuing animals, and I told you this story about this cat that was in this abandoned building across from my house. And all summer, my fourth grade year, I tried to rescue it and finally rescued it. And like a week or two later, they blew up the building. And, from that point on, I just sort of felt, doing something with animals was my calling. So, after college, I moved out to Los Angeles to live with my brother. And I went up there to make a career in the film industry, hopefully. But instead of working on films, I kept rescuing animals. And that sort of became my full-time job. And I got a reputation. And then I decided to come back to New York. And I tried to get a job. I even offered my services for free to, places like the Humane Society and ASPCA, but I didn't hear back. So I started a pet service, and, my first customer was a cat, but within a few years, we grew to be one of the larger pet services in the country. And from there, about 5 or 10 years after starting that, I started coaching people, and I wrote a book on the industry. And that's taken me to now where, I'm starting Sparky Go, which is going to be sort of like a Yelp for the pet industry, where pet businesses will be able to promote their services and all the specialties they offer. So, I'm a lifer in terms of working with animals.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dive into Sparky Go here a little bit later. You mentioned that you mentioned you grew your business to one of the largest in the country. But after a while, you kind of changed your mind about the philosophy of what a business should look like. So you changed the structure at one point. Why did you decide to do that?
The big idea is that I'd lost control at a certain point. It got so large. It got so large that, I wouldn't remember all the customers' names or dogs' names, and it just didn't feel right. And, I had this mindset that no one else could do my job. So I did the job of 10 people when I should have been doing the job of, like 5 people, as we say. As an entrepreneur, you're always going to do more jobs than you should.
Right.
But I had a problem giving up control to someone to help me out. And it was overwhelming. I mean, and so what happened around that time is I started studying to be a business coach, a personal coach. And I was taught this concept of coach approach leadership, which is you take the mindset of coaching, but you bring it to a workplace. And so instead of trying to create this company with employees, it really changed to this idea where I was almost coaching people on the job. And let me tell you the good and bad of that. Like before I went to coaching school, I was sort of coaching people on the job, but I was coaching them to leave my business. So I was really interested in their career, and I'd inspire them, and we'd talk a lot, but it would lead to them leaving because I'd inspire them to do something else. So I remember one time leading up to New Year's, I gave out this survey, which was like really in depth, like, what's something you liked as a kid? What's something that you studied in college? What's something you've always wanted to do as a career? And 3 people, including my manager, who was about to start to take over for me, came to me literally within a few weeks of each other and said, I got to tell you, that survey really made me realize what I need to do with my life, but it was something else. So two things came out of the coach approach leadership. One, I started hiring people who actually really were better fit for a career in the pet industry. So I could coach them authentically in the pet industry and not feel like I'm trying to push them into the industry. And it's a beautiful thing. So I started coaching them, sort of mentoring them to learn what I had learned and find ideas that they like. And we've created a lot of interesting businesses from it, related to dog sports and dog grooming and dog training, like really interesting niches. So I'd say that's the major difference. I went from workers and employees to an environment where I was almost their mentor more.
It sounds like, too, that you looked at the people around you and saw where their strengths were. And then,
Yes.
as you said, coach them into this other stuff. So how did that impact the pet sitting business that you were running?
Oh, it's been amazing, because part of what I'm saying, I think, is reflective of this idea in itself. Part of it, I think, is reflective of the next generation. The next generations, they want more responsibility than I'd say my generation and before it did, or at least they expect more responsibility. And while a lot of people in my generation see that as a bad thing, I see it as amazing. So in a sense, they're saying not even with more pay necessarily, they want to be a bigger part of things. And you give them more responsibility and they work harder and they do more work and they're happier. How's that a bad thing? I think what it is, it's that fear of control, giving up control. And
right.
So that thing that led to my initial problem is now sort of like a muscle. It's becoming stronger. It's becoming a strength of mine. And you're not worried about that as much.
Well, I think part of that too is being okay and trusting people that they can handle that responsibility. Was that something that you ever struggled with?
Yeah, I'd say so. There's the fear. There's a concern of safety, as we've discussed, in terms of, God forbid a dog gets off leash or someone does something in someone's apartment. There's that. And then there's I think that's a big one for me, honestly. I think, my design is, I have a strong danger awareness, I'll call it. I think a lot of the great pet professionals have danger awareness. And so it makes a great dog walker because you're really mindful of safety and, things on the ground, other dogs, when you're going in and out of buildings, things like that. I know when I say buildings to some of you who are listening, you're going into homes, individual single homes. But for others, we're going into buildings where there might be 50 to 100 people living in the building. And, there might be a dog in the elevator or a dog jump in the elevator with you. So there's a lot more action.
What got you over that hump to start entrusting that people others could actually perform the duties that you were doing?
Well, it's a great question. I think there's a few things. One of them is I have always had this mindset that, I do feel overall confident in the walkers I've hired and the sitters and the trainers in terms of the job they've done. I've sort of embraced the fact that this might always be hard for someone like me dealing with that. But I've also done everything possible to lessen the chance of something happening. We were very early, one of the earliest in terms of using rock climbing belts, wearing them with a carabiner attached to the dog. We're really big on training the walkers. The equipment, they get tested on putting on the equipment. We have a 4-week training program actually before we let someone completely on their own. So we put in policies and procedures, but part of it is it's sort of just coming to terms with the fact that it's a tough part of the job for someone who's safety minded, but it's sort of like they say every trait you have has two sides, a positive and a negative. So to me, it's using a positive side of my concern for safety by helping other people be more safe in general. So, we try and make it a benefit.
Throughout 2020, many businesses actually ended up adding a lot of services or changing up the services that they did offer just to stay afloat and keep their businesses operational. Going through what you've gone in expanding and then kind of changing how the business was structured, what advice would you give to those businesses so that they can stay streamlined and focused in their work?
That's a great question. And I'll go back to, I think there's a similar theme of you have to not be so scared. So many pet businesses that start to grow become really scared of people robbing their clients, of people robbing their ideas, of, that they can be destroyed, so to speak. And they spend a lot of time and energy concentrated on this. And what I've grown to just believe is if you're always concentrating on your business in terms of making it better for your customers, making it better for your walkers, just trying to make the best business possible, nothing can ever destroy your company. Like, you might have some bad things happen. You might have some clients stolen. You might have some people leave who, you're not thrilled with. But people get really distracted with those type of concerns. And, there's a quote that I've heard, I think it was Mark Cuban, who said, perfection is the enemy of progress. And so if you're looking for this perfect world, I used to tell people who would help me manage my companies, you have to find perfection in the imperfection, because there's never going to be perfection in this industry. It's messy. There's human lives, there's traffic, there's animal lives, there's housing, there's landlords, there's people on the street. There's so many different things that can come up on a daily walk or a daily drive. And we're in the middle of all of it, right? Like, we are on the pavement. That's what our industry is. And you just have to grow to be able to roll with it, be the calm leader if you have people working for you. If not, you have to try and coach yourself to be calm and not let the fear of anything destroying your company, guide your decisions. If you just always keep moving forward and staying positive, it doesn't guarantee bad things won't happen. I think it guarantees you'll be a happier person and very likely more successful in your business.
Do you think that fear comes from a feeling of imposter syndrome, or is that just purely out of an overabundance of caution? Because as you're talking, it's like, I'm realizing as a business owner, like, all of the cracks in the foundation, all of the stuff that you've had to stucco over to keep it up and moving. And so as you grow, when you're at the top, I'm sure it feels more like you've built a house of cards as opposed to something on a strong foundation.
I think it's really well said. I think when we start our businesses, there's more of a reckless abandon is not the right wording. After I just complimented your wording. But there's more of a freedom I feel people fear. There's a line in the movie Wall Street, the first one, the good one. And it says, I never knew how poor I was till I made a little money. And I think that quote works really well in our industry, where people don't feel necessarily like they have anything to protect until they create it.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying is that, oh my God, the first few years of my business, the way I just kept going and going and nothing could stop me. And, a lot of rough things happened, but I kept moving forward and forward and forward. Can I tell you one of those things that happens, actually?
What? Sure.
Yeah. I had this really pretty famous customer, and they were a huge customer. I think it was almost $2,000 a week. That's how much we did. And I'm talking beginning of the day, multiple times during the day and at night, 7 days a week. And they started to not pay. They started to go on vacation. And the next thing I know, the bill ran up to almost $8,000. And I had paid I had done part of the service, and I'd had a walker do part of the service. So I'd paid that walker probably $2,000 or $3,000 out of pocket. And so that money was gone. So basically, instead of paying the bill, they ended service. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not going to ever get that money. I've just paid out a few $1,000s out of pocket. And this is early in my business. So that few $1,000s out of pocket was like everything I had.
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you the depression I started to feel because, I was feeling great. Like business is going great and all this money. And then all of a sudden it's like I'm broke and I just felt terrible. And so in the midst of that anxiety, I remember waking up one morning and I was like in a blaze of depression. And I had these huge garbage bags full of gift bags that I used to go out and give people in targeted marketing. And I went to the dog run and I just start walking up to people and I'm giving out the bags and, talking to people and everything's going on. This woman I knew, she came over and she says, "Oh my God, you're so good with, doing this and so good with people." And I'm just sitting there like, are you kidding me? Like, how can I come off good? I'm so depressed. And a few weeks later, I can't get into it too much, but I was able to get the money. And I got it all in one check. So it was the most money I ever received in one check in my life. And I took that money and I immediately back then, credit cards was not that common. And so I got a credit card machine. I invested a ton in marketing, other investments in the company. And that's when we took off. That's when we blew up. So, that's just one example, right? Like some really hard stuff to build my business. And so my point is that when you get really large, it's that quote from Wall Street a little bit again. I never knew how poor was till I had a little money. Then you start to defend what you have, sometimes more than continuing to innovate and to grow. And so for a while, I got lost. And, I feel great because I got back on track. But I really try and help people not get lost. Usually there's a lot of people in our industry who suffer from burnout. And I've explained my own burnout. So it's personal to me. Like, I really try and help people, but that topic of control and giving up control, it's a tough one for people to embrace because this quote's going to hit home for some of us. And I've even said it to people who work for me before in this program. I've said, I think you'd rather be in control than be successful. And I think there's a lot of people who would rather be in control, even if it meant they're not successful.
Have you heard about Time to Pet? Claire from Acton Critter Sitters has this to say.
Time to Pet has honestly revolutionized how we do business. My sitters can work much more independently because they have ongoing access to customer and pet information without relying on me. I save hours upon hours of administrative time on billing, processing payments, and generating paychecks.
If you are looking for a new pet sitting software for your business, give Time to Pet a try. As a listener of Pet Sitter Confessional, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months when you sign up at timetopet.com/confessional. How do you see that manifesting in a business owner as they're growing and operating? How do you walk that balance between being in control versus being successful?
That is the big question. I mean, did you used to watch Kitchen Nightmares?
Yes. Yeah, those are
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the running theme, isn't it? Is that people will literally, hasn't been working for like 7-10 years. They're like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. One of the greatest chefs, most successful chefs in the world comes in, and they still, some of them won't bend. They're like, no, I got to keep my last 7 customers instead of getting 50 new ones, And I honestly think this is a heavy issue for a lot of people. I think that, any of us who have control issues, which is the majority of people, we have it for different reasons. Usually something in our childhood, how we were raised, something in school, a tragedy, trauma, what have you. We all have our reasons. And then it comes down to how much do we work on it, to get better at it. But, you asked a specific question about how it manifests in the businesses. And, I think there's the topic of the big one is if you involve other people in your business. That is the biggest test for someone in terms of control is you start out as an individual dog walker, pet sitter, dog trainer, whatever it is, and the brand is you. Some people even sometimes call the brand after their name. And then you're going to bring in other people who are going to represent you. And it can be really scary. And sometimes we can be horrible managers because we haven't learned to trust yet. And I think people who have major issues with that have to figure out if they can work on it and even be upfront with the person who's working with them that, that they need to work on it. Or there's some people who maybe would be better off not hiring people, to be honest. There's people who would be better off finding a way to increase how much they can make themselves. But, I think what you have to do is that concept that, perfection is the enemy of progress. So in the pet industry, to grow, there's going to be some mistakes that happen. And sometimes what happens is the moment there's a mistake, we go, oh, see, I knew it, it doesn't work. And we run back and we forget it. But instead of going, okay, let me look at this, let me examine the issue, try and find a solution and keep moving forward. Now, I'm going to balance what I'm saying out with safety. I do think that safety has to be highly serious in our businesses, with the pets. And, you have to have people knowledgeable of pets working with you. But the other stuff, making a mistake, making a billing mistake, forgetting to do something in a client's home that's not safety oriented, especially. I think we have to give someone the chance to grow and improve. And, often people who complain about the people who work for them are sometimes hiring the wrong people. They're not putting enough time into who they hire. So before I go into too many topics, that's my answer.
No,
you ask good questions.
Oh, you're good. You're good. No, I appreciate that because, you mentioned, giving people permission to grow and improve. And I think that first starts with ourselves. As business owners, we start out solopreneurs, we start out by ourselves, and we get these things in operation and how we operate, but giving ourselves permission to change and adapt over time. So we let go of that control, that perceived control that we thought we had, opening ourselves up to new opportunities. And I think 2020 kind of forced a lot of our hands in that, where we had to immediately let go of control because it was taken from us, right? And then we had to start looking for other opportunities.
Yeah, I'm so prone to start asking questions myself because I'm a coach.
Oh, sure.
So I'm trying not to interview you.
Oh, it's okay.
I was just going to ask you, what type of changes do you find that you've made or were forced to make?
Well, so some things that we had to do was we had to change a lot about our booking process because we were still doing most of it manually, and the behavior of our clients changed to where it was a lot of expectations for immediate access or on the spot booking preferences for them. And so I know that was something that we had kind of resisted because we liked the personal touch. We liked the process that had in it, but that stopped working because of the expectations of the clients. So we did have to shift and start offering a different way to book and actually a different way to access and contact us when the clients were ready for their service.
And would you say that it's actually improved things?
Yeah, it is. It has.
That's the funny thing, right?
Yeah. And who knows how much longer it would have taken to get to that point had 2020 not happened, right?
Yes. Well, that's something I think we discussed was the pandemic has sped up certain industry changes and, technological changes somewhere in the realm of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Like pushed it ahead where it's happening now.
Yeah. It has. And
So,
I think,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, I got you.
Oh, no. I was just thinking about, when we think back to some of the biggest changes to the industry from 2020, I mean, that's got to rank up there with some of the major impacts, was just technologically bringing and forcing a whole bunch of the crowd forward.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. Like, in the same way you're noticing some of the benefits of it, I think it certainly is a good thing. Just in terms of credit cards as well, there's so much data that shows that people spend more on credit cards than other forms of payment. So, that in itself is good. This is interesting because in terms of this topic, I think I had thought about the things that had become more difficult in terms of the industry this year. But you're making me happy to hear a good side of it as well. Have you seen, in terms of businesses you talk to, have you seen other changes, with them maybe becoming more, like hustling more and trying to become more resourceful with everything going on?
I would say yes. I would say that for who we talk to and kind of who we stay in touch with, that 2020 really broke the mold for what they thought their business was going to be. And it was kind of like this, however many stages of grief owners had to go through to say, the business I thought I was going to have in 2020 is no longer existing. I accept that. And now I have to seize the opportunities that I can while they're available to me. And so it was it was kind of this little mind shift that happened throughout the year.
It's interesting because it almost feels like we're circling back to the discussion of when someone first starts and how they sort of just go for it a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
There could be a little bit of that with companies.
Yeah, I think absolutely that, again, when you almost had to act like it was your first day on the job, because especially for the businesses who lost 100% of their existing clients, right? They had no new bookings and they had no reoccurring bookings.
Speaking to one of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was like, okay, I have zero, just like I did on day one when I started 5, 10, 20 years ago. What do I do given everything that's going on?
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of our side, the service that has really blown up for us has been dog training. And, that is partly where I'm located, and a lot because of the pandemic, because everyone went and got a dog. When they say the shelters are empty, they were really being serious. And so there's a lot of people who need dog training. And here's the amazing thing. I talked to a lot of dog trainers, and many of them are saying that dog training is better virtually because the customers have to do the homework. and often there's people who hire a dog trainer and they're like, yeah, go figure it out. And, then they slack on the homework. But in this environment, they have to do the homework, and they're seeing great. I mean, there's some trainers who I've heard they really want to stick to this, forever. So I think that's another example maybe of an improvement. Something we've learned during this time.
Well, one thing that you did a little while ago at this point was you kind of cold called or got in contact with a lot of pet owners and who had used services like Rover and Wag, and you would ask them about some differences or what they thought of what a pet sitter was. And so I'd like for you to talk about that article and the process that you put in behind that. And I guess give us a definition of what would you say clients or pet owners, how would they describe what a pet sitter is in 2021?
It was an interesting experience, to say the least. I did some of the interviews live on my Facebook page, and I'd be looking down at the comments, and people would be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe what the Rover." So just to be specific, what I did is I solicited 100 Rover pet parents, people who use Rover for their own pets, and I did interviews with them. And I would ask them things related to what do you see the benefit of Rover over the term I use. Let's say, you were saying pet sitter. I call it independent pet businesses. That's sort of the comparison I've used to Rover Wag. And, they would talk about things like they believed a Rover walker was insured, but they weren't so sure about an independent. And they would say that they love the Rover app, they love doing business on it, they trust it, and they trust that the people on it, they sort of associate quality service with people on the platform. So the platform itself is carrying a lot of weight for these people. And in terms of our industry, the Rover parents saw us as more, the Wild West, like not really under any supervision, not necessarily insured, and not seeing the benefit of our industry over theirs in terms of quality of service. So it took a lot of patience and meditation through the conversations for me not to be like, what are you talking about? But the truth is that this is the mindset of a lot of pet parents. And, a lot of them, they just want their dog to have their chest rubbed and they think everything's fine. And obviously, people, we see a big difference between the independent market and the Rover Wag. And to answer your question about that, to me, in general, I see an independent pet professional or pet business as someone who, on the whole, is usually more serious about the job. They're very likely doing it full time. They get seen a lot in the neighborhood. They get known. People know their face. If they do something really stupid with a dog, it gets noticed. Someone knows who they are. The problem I have with these apps is that on top of the fact that a lot of the people are not very well prepared to do the job, they don't get known. They don't do the job consistently. And so when bad things happen, it's not picked up on the same way. There's not patterns of consistency. And, if you're a customer and you hire an independent pet service, like yours and mine, there can be a lot of benefits there where you have the supervision of an owner, the philosophies of an owner. You might have a manager in the company. You might have multiple walkers who, there's peer expectations. If a walker sees another guy in the company doing a really bad job, he might speak up about it. These things matter. And I'm not sitting here saying that our industry is perfect. I think it's far from perfect. I just think that the chance of a serious pet professional coming out of our industry is much higher than, the app ecosystems. I think the app ecosystems are more like someone who wants to make some money on the side, do it once in a while. It's sort of like an Airbnb or Uber for dogs. And so I'm not speaking down on those people. I'm not speaking down on the platforms, but some of these platforms are looking to start dog training. And, you just can't compare the history of knowledge and seriousness between the industries. And the last thing I'll just say is that Rover and Wag Walkers are independent contractors. And so the apps legally try and have a standoff approach in terms of how they do the job. Now, even if you have a contractor at a pet service can have a point of view about how they work with pets. They can invite people to take classes and, they can motivate people to expand their knowledge. And that's a big difference to me. So, to me, there's a reason dog trainers usually come from the dog walking world. And it's, there's a lot of serious people doing it, but we also have to improve our industry. But that's the difference I see between the two.
It is jarring to hear that the clients, that the customers have these perspectives. So in your mind, you mentioned that they were kind of putting it, the app was pulling a lot of the weight here. Do you think that these
Right.
views have arisen because of this, just the pure superiority of the app, or are there messaging problems within the pet care industry at large?
Well, that's a great question as well. Let me soak it in for a second here. I do think it's a bit of both. I think that when you find an app that you use a lot, if it works well and your dog appears happy and you're getting pictures and, the expectation for quality care is not that high, I find. You send pictures, you send feedback. The discussion is not about someone noticing that a dog had blood in its stool or swallowed something. It's not about safety and things like that. Mm. So our industry definitely, I feel, has been sensationalized in the papers. When something happens, it's a really big story. That has now become Rover and Wag. Rover and Wag have had a lot of bad press. But before them, the newspapers would sensationalize a story, and customers definitely, I think they were worried about that. They are worried about that. And there's something about an app that I think can calm people's fears. There's apps I use like Craigslist and some others where there's been some bad stuff on those platforms, but, I have a connection to them. So, yeah, I do think it's a bit of both.
You mentioned that the expectations of service are pretty low already. So how does that impact the purchasing intent of the client when they go to compare these different offerings for care for their pet?
That's right. That's the thing, is that I think they start to live on the app. The app becomes the ecosystem. Mm. And of course, these apps are in a race to increase their offerings. They've started to offer cat sitting. I know dog training's on in the future. These type of businesses are, there's Banfield that does vets. There are large corporations that, they're trying to create their own ecosystem. So in a sense, Rover or Wag, it's like, they want to become their own little Google for a pet parent. And that locks our type of business out. And that's the thing, is when someone gets in that ecosystem and they want to search, they appear to be searching on Google less. Mm. So, there's less of a chance they're going to find us. And obviously, we don't have the marketing budgets that they do. It's not all doom and gloom. This is part of the reason I created Sparky Go, is actually to have a platform that represents independent pet businesses and the way we operate.
Yeah, so I was going to say, let's go ahead and dive right in, because we're kind of leading there. Yeah, how did Sparky Go come about?
Well, it's a good lead in, because a lot of it is reflected of what we just discussed, which is I've seen all these apps popping up, and I'm in New York City, where New York City is such a large pet market that we have our own mini Rover and Wags just here in New York City that only operate here, that are like VC backed. And the thing I find, I don't look to hate on anyone, but when I look at a lot of these companies, what I find interesting, if you go to the LinkedIn profiles, is you'll find 150 extremely accomplished software people. But what you won't find are the best trainers in the world, the best dog pet equipment people in the world, the greatest thinkers to sort of like improve the dog's life. And, that bothers me, because they have a lot of money to play with. And I want that money to play with. I want a QR version of Rover and Wag. But yeah, I would say that, to me, I felt I saw the tea leaves pretty early. Over 10 years ago, I started to see some of these changes, moving away from independent pet businesses And, a story that stands out for me is, I told you about how one of my pets had died. And like many of us, I was literally like a zombie for a few weeks and just sitting in bed. And, my wife took me outside for a walk, and we went for a walk, and I'm sitting on a corner, and I look across the street, and I see this dog walker, walk up to the curb. And in New York City, we have very busy curbs, and she stayed back from the curb, and she put the dog in a sit stay, and everything was just so fluid, and the dog was smiling, and she put up her hand, and then the light changed. She gave the dog a treat as they started walking, and they were smiling at each other. And I'm like, I just saw that. So I know that that's a good dog walker, but the pet parent doesn't get to see that. The pet parent is making their decision on what quality service is from pictures, from notes. Very little of it is based on what they see with the person actually doing the job. And even if they did see someone doing the job, many people wouldn't understand the difference between that walker and, say, someone who really doesn't know what they're doing. So, the platform is meant to, yes, hopefully put a bigger spotlight on those who are awesome, and then to help out the next group of people who are looking to get in the industry to go a better direction, to go a direction, maybe toward more the mind of a dog trainer, and things like that. And let me rephrase that. I don't mean a better direction. It's just, the direction I think leads to better care myself. The one other big reason why I created Sparky Go is I'm really interested in sort of indexes and directories that take locations and services and products and makes them easy to find. And so Yelp and Google are the two main ones for our industry for like putting your business up and getting reviews. But, in many ways, I feel like they have failed our industry in terms of many industries, but, it's like one size fits all. And they're not designed for the realities of the pet professional or the pet parent. And, like Yelp, it was designed around the idea that everybody had like a commercial space, like they had an office.
Yeah.
A pet professional might work in 15 neighborhoods or something. And so Sparky Go will allow you to rank highly in all those different neighborhoods. Sparky Go will also put a big emphasis on specialties. So, sure, there's dog walkers, pet sitters, dog trainers. There's all different types of pet professionals, but there's also specialists within those. There's dog walkers who are better for senior dogs. There are dog walkers who can administer medicine. I can just go on and on. I mean, for each type of pet profession, we probably have 30, 40, 50 service pages, niches for each of those that someone can find someone by. So you're never going to find that in Yelp and Google.
Right.
I mean, it's not a niche service-based, specialty-based search.
Well, yeah, I think that addresses several problems that are faced. You mentioned things like service area and these specialized care, because if we're trying to compete with the SEO, the marketing, these other kind of campaigns, you do need to be able to be surfaced easily for the right services that you're going to be providing.
Yeah, you just said a mouthful, which is the SEO, the local SEO, competing with the marketing of these apps. Here's the thing. If our industry is united and, partly united on Sparky Go, also united in other places, but if they're united in Sparky Go for what they offer, where they offer it, things like that, the ability to be contacted, there is the strong possibility that Sparky Go could rank higher than the Rover and the Yelps. And by using the exact same techniques they do. But right now, what people are doing is they are promoting their Yelp pages, but most people in our industry hate Yelp.
Yes.
They don't even want to go to their pages. They're scared of reading the reviews. They send people to put reviews. They don't always get on the page. The review structure is going to be very important on our platform in terms of trying to make it really fair for the pet professional. I think it's something that, however it starts on our platform, is going to change through the feedback from the pet professionals. I want to mention one other thing, which is Sparky Go is going to put a big emphasis on referral partners, people in your area who offer non-competing services, who you're going to have a bookmarking page, so you can easily bookmark other people on Sparky Go. You're going to have your own bookmarking page, and it's going to be a really nice way to try and keep people in this circle, to try and make sure they don't leave for one of those other ecosystems we talked about. Whether it's a vet in a different neighborhood or an animal rescue or a dog boarder, whatever it is, you're going to have this little nucleus. And who knows, there's a chance in the future, if people want it, we might even be able to monetize the referral process. But most importantly, people like to refer, and it's going to make it much easier to do.
I like that idea, again, of looking across the industry and trying to raise everybody up around us, because that's going to highlight the best of the best. That's going to highlight the people and the passion that they have behind them, and start putting forward this unified message as an industry. Yeah.
It's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah.
I don't think our industry is used to working together.
Right.
And, maybe the pandemic, the time is ripe where, people will both need and maybe want the help of others, accepting the help of others, which, just to bring back the whole control thing, I think actually an interesting thing with control is accepting help and not being too prideful. And Sparky Go, let alone we can help you. It's all free. And see, the thing about it is I'm really good at local SEO, and your profile page on Sparky Go will be completely designed for local SEO. So I'd say there's a good chance that people will be able to get more customers and rank higher on Sparky Go than they will with their own website. There's a lot of opportunities there.
Have you ever wondered how joining PetSit International could benefit your business? Imagine you have a business situation you're not sure how to handle. Maybe you need to figure out how to communicate a price increase to your clients. Or you have a staff sitter who's providing subpar service. Perhaps you have a question about a pet's unusual behavior, or you're exploring whether you should earn a pet sitter certification. Then imagine you know exactly where to turn to access these answers and resources you need, all in one place. That's only the start of what a PSI membership can do for you. With a free monthly member toolkit, monthly bonus resources, online trainings, a private member Facebook group, and more, combined with group rates on insurance and background checks, PSI is our one-stop shop for everything you need for your pet sitting or dog walking business. Visit petsit.com/PSC to learn more. Our listeners can save $15 off your first year membership by using the promo code PSC15 at checkout.
Tell me what you think as well. I mean, there will be normalization in some areas, but I also think in some areas like New York City, certain things are going to be changed forever. That doesn't mean they're gone. That doesn't mean you can't operate. It just, I think in some areas, things are changed forever in terms of the service industry.
I agree. I think a lot of that, as you said, services that haven't been wiped off entirely, maybe have reduced or maybe needing reframed in how we're messaging to them. I know for us, we've had clients that for years and years they were just fine with their dogs, and the number of times I've heard them talk about how they were so tired of their dogs around them and just needed a break. It was like, you asked them 2 years ago or at the beginning of last year, they would have been like, oh, I love my dogs. I want them around me all the time. And now they're like, can you take them for a little longer? Just a little longer, please. It's this.
You're talking to the parent of 2 kids.
Yeah. Same.
I told them last night, I said, your parents, I told them we're not meant to spend 24 hours a day together for a year and a half. So This has not been a normal situation. So
Yeah.
if you had a few extra arguments or you feel weird sometimes, it's understandable. This is not a normal situation.
Right. but
Yeah.
but I think that speaks to just how we message our services to meet those clients' needs, right? Like how we talked about this a little bit earlier, doing our part to think for the customers, to think for the clients, and to really see where that help is needed to solve those problems for them, because they still have things that need solved. They still have services. They just, need to have the right phrasing to cue them into exactly how you're going to help them with that.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, do you offer flexible scheduling? Like, are you used to flexible scheduling? Is that your main type of service?
Yeah, we have been pretty flexible in times past too. That was something that we kind of kept standard. To some extent, we've been more flexible going into or through last year, just because we realized the behavior of a lot of our clients where they were going to wait until Thursday at 3 p.m. to decide if they were going to be leaving at Friday at 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. Because of all of the travel restrictions and changing, and flight cancellations were way through the roof because of rerouting people through cities. So we recognized that and just said, you know what, it's fine.
That's smart. Yeah. I think flexible scheduling. It's everything we're saying is sort of resorting back to when we all first started. It's sort of anytime, any place, a little bit till things stabilize.
Thinking towards the future here, what's some advice or recommendations you would give for long-term, at this point, I think it's still safe to say, long-term survival in the industry?
Yes. Well, I think it's going to encompass a few things we've discussed today, which, one of the big things I tell people is to increase how much money you make yourself. I say the worst day for pet professionals when they stop working with animals themselves. That's the most fun, but you also don't have to share that money with anybody else. And so if you can, try and increase how much you make. That might be, if you can offer a premium service like dog training or dog grooming, like learning a premium service can increase, you can make in 1 hour what you make usually in 2 or 3 hours. So looking at premium services is definitely one thing I recommend to people. If you do have people who work for you, I go back to the idea of empowering them. When you make them feel like there's no ceiling in terms of how much they can learn, how much they can grow, and how much they can make, you get more out of people and you get happier people. And again, I find, and I think a lot of people do, that young people today, they almost demand this and they won't stick around if they can't get these things. So, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But with that, again, comes back to this thing of don't be scared about the ramifications of, if I teach this person, what if they rob from me or steal from me, staying focused on your company. And, I think in the end, everything should work out if you stay focused on your company and your customers. But the big ones I would say are the premium services. That's really the main thing I would say to someone is increase how much you make yourself and concentrate on premium services, because as they've proven, those services have continued to thrive even during the pandemic.
I did want to touch on the training aspect because you've mentioned that several times now. So what kind of recommendations or advice would you give to someone listening who wants to learn more about being a trainer or actually become a certified trainer?
Definitely. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a trainer. So the advice I'm giving is really a collection from people who are really smart people in the dog training community. And it just does seem like you need to find a reputable program. I used to think that, maybe people could find some good books and take some online courses, but a reputable online program. And we're going to have a resource page at Sparky Go that's going to have things like this, sort of like a roadmap laid out. And it's going to be from the advice of really top people in the industry. And after you go to a school, it's sort of part of going to school. They set you up with a dog trainer to apprentice with. So, go to a program, take the program. It might be something you have to pay off over a few years, but when you compare the price of a dog training program to going to college, it's really not that expensive. I mean, when you hear, $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, that's a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not, but if you can spread out the payments over a few years, and you're committed to it, I really think it's a good investment. While you're apprenticing, or even after you apprentice, it's pretty rare that a dog trainer doesn't dog walk or pet sit or both. So it's a great way to start to, gradually involve your training with pets and getting to know customers. And that's really the route I would recommend. The program and the apprenticeship just seem like absolute must.
Second that to the nth degree. I think it's a great way to start adding bundles or adding these more premium services and just raise prices across the board, because now you are a trainer and you can integrate it into everything you do and all the services that you provide, and it just kind of again just raises everything up a couple notches.
Exactly. And I mean, your pet service becomes a petri dish of dog issues. Both in terms of, yes, there's a lot of profit potential, but there's, in the beginning as a trainer, you want as many varied situations as you can to grow, right? To be able to learn to deal with anything. And, or at least to start to figure out which, you might start to decide you don't want to work with aggressive dogs. That experience will help you. I mean, in terms of being a dog trainer as well, because dog walking and the pet sitting world, you can approach other dog walking and pet sitting companies and offer your services to them for dogs within the company. I mean, as we all know, you're at threat of losing a dog if it has issues on the walk, if you can't get it outside, if it has anxiety, stress, if it has aggression. These are all things that sometimes lead to, God forbid, the owner gives up the dog, but sometimes other situations, they go with a walk and train service, or they go with daycare boarding, which is not the solution, but for that. And, dog trainers and dog walkers, pet sitters, daycare boarding, that relationship to me is the most underutilized relationship in the pet service industry. Every single pet service of any type should, if not have their own dog trainer, have strong relationships with dog trainers. There's just such an opportunity for benefiting the pets and referral, for both sides to profit. It's a slam dunk.
Josh, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and I'm so thankful for our conversation regarding coming together as an industry to raise the boat of everybody, and our discussion around changing clients' purchasing intent and behavior as changes continue to happen to the industry. But I know we talked about an awful lot, and there's still so much more to all of this. How can people check out Sparky Go, and how can people get in touch with you and pick your brain on more of this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for the great conversation. You piqued a lot of ideas I hadn't even thought about before today. The best place to go is sparkygo.com. On the homepage, there's a link where you can sign up to be alerted when we launch. Please do that. And there's also a blog that's presently there, and there's a contact page. If you want to reach out to me, please do. I'm always happy to answer questions. I also help people with SEO and marketing, so I'd love to speak.
Awesome. Josh, again, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Me too. Yeah, thank you so much.
There's certainly a lot to unpack from my conversation with Josh, but to me, the biggest takeaway is the consistently changing client expectations and purchasing intent of our clients and customers. What this means is as we move through 2021, we'll have to be really sensitive to how people are changing their habits and how we can best adapt to that, how we can start using better language to speak to their needs, and how we can help solve that. It means that we as an industry have to come together if we want to see lasting positive changes and influences for everybody. Normalization of behaviors and expectations happen quickly when the majority of people are after something. That also means that when the industry is working together and everybody's on the same page, we can elicit some really awesome positive changes for everybody moving forward. I want to thank our sponsors, Time to Pet and PetSit International, for making today's show possible. And we would absolutely love to hear how you have experienced changing client expectations and about how you've had to streamline or stay adaptive and stay in tune with the needs of your customers. Thank you so much for listening this week. We'll be back again soon.